I just get pictures. Yeah.
Well, I have to take mine with me anyway. People case.
I actually hurt my hand.
Okay, good evening, everyone. What a great turnout tonight for this lovely book. My name is Mylène Simard. I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Oostertown. We're gathered here tonight to celebrate the launch of Winnipeg 150, Stories Our Buildings Tell, published by Heritage Winnipeg with illustrations by Robert J. Sweeney. So following a series of presentations from the podium here, there'll be plenty of time to ask questions. So think of your questions now. When the time comes, I will pop out from the back with a microphone so that everybody who's watching from home can hear you clearly. So raise your hands. Once it's question time, I will come find you. I'll be back at the close of the event to review signing procedures. But for now, join me in welcoming the Executive Director of Heritage Winnipeg, Cindy Tugwell.
Good evening and welcome, and thank you for coming to our book launch this evening. Can everybody hear me fine? I'm kind of loud, so usually don't have a problem. As she mentioned, I'm Executive Director of Heritage Winnipeg. I've been with Heritage Winnipeg. This is my 31st year. So I've seen a lot of changes, a lot of things over the decades, and we are really thrilled. This is our only second book we've ever published outside of Armstrong's Point of History, but it's very special to us because this really shows over 150 years our beautiful built heritage and how it really built our city and what it truly contributed over the years. And we'd like to start off by saying thank you to McNally Robinson for the book launch this evening. And this book wouldn't have come into fruition if I didn't say thank you to Mayor Scott Gillingham, City of Winnipeg, for financially helping to support the book, and also the Thomas Sill Foundation. So thank you very much for their funding. And I just wanted, for those of you who don't know who we are, only because the last few months we've been getting a lot of 311 calls forwarded, so a lot of people think we're City of Winnipeg. We are definitely a nonprofit charitable organization, but we serve Winnipeggers. We, not unlike the bureaucrats and elected officials, provide many services on behalf of our built heritage conservation, not only protection, but moreover how to retrofit and how to rehabilitate some of these heritage buildings so they have a new life. So we celebrate when they were built, their historic value, the architects, the type of architecture, certainly what it does for our urban landscape and for our historic streetscapes. But moreover, these buildings, we can't save them unless they are actually occupied in a vibrant part of our streetscape. And certainly we've seen an evolution over the last 3 decades with the Exchange District, once empty, now a National Historic Site since 1997. Almost all the buildings, there's some signature pieces that we've all heard about in the news, but for the most part, almost every building in the Exchange now is occupied. And it's enduring COVID, so there are some vacancies, but now they're starting for the first time since the 60s and the 70s, they're doing infill on all of those unsightly surface parking lots in the Exchange and the downtown. So we as heritage conservationists are really part of urban planning, and we are part of supporting new development. So the Exchange certainly being the pinnacle, the jewel in the crown for built heritage, that's for sure. So we're here today. The book was a love to art. We love heritage and art go well together. So we have 150 original prints, drawings, pardon me, from artist Robert Sweeney. And Robert has donated an immense amount of time over many years to our organization. And we feel it's a great partnership to work with artists. A lot of artists work out of the Exchange District in downtown. And he's been wonderful as part of our Doors Open Winnipeg event, our awards, and certainly depicting the beautiful buildings the way they should look. And this also is a perspective, a chronological journey. So we look at this as an educational piece. It's not just beautiful, but we try to give you a chronological depiction of Winnipeg when it first started in 1874, some of the salient themes throughout it, transportation, certainly one of them. We have all diverse buildings, churches, schools, buildings that are extant, and sadly buildings that have been demolished, but a testament to our built heritage being part of our stories. And we also feel that this is also our book, Heritage Winnipeg's story, not just another book commemorating, although it is very important to know we wanted to have a tangible souvenir for 150. The most I can recollect for the 100th anniversary was pins and stickers. So we felt this could be a beautiful coffee table book. It could be educational for the schools, because people don't want to read a lot now. So we give you a really nice journey of 150 years, but moreover, what we do, because we're advocacy and education based, is we throw in our stories. If it was retrofitted, if it took 30 years to protect it from demolition. When you look at now the new story that will be written moving forward with the Hudson's Bay downtown building, with the Southern Chiefs, or the former Bank of Montreal with the Manitoba Métis Federation. I guess we're not stuck in time. We're giving you the story over 150 years that is actually going to continue for the next 150. And hopefully a lot of these beautiful buildings will still be protected and will still be a vibrant part of our community. I was asked today what was one of my favorite buildings, and I said, I have so many, but the ones that really stand in my mind are the ones that we spent a lot of years protecting. And one that most of you would know today would be the former Royal Bank building at 504 Main Street, right on William and Main, which is now the Red River Culinary School, world class. Beautiful. At the time, when it was rehabilitated, it was a $30+ million project, but now it is a signature piece across Canada. Certainly the James Avenue pumping station, another one under demolition and threat of demolition for over 3 decades. Some of these buildings have stood the test of time, and now we can't imagine Red River Princess Street, the Hotel Fort Garry. A lot of these buildings were facing the wrecking ball. So it is really nice. Our organization has been around now for 45 years. There was a lot of people that formed this organization, were grassroots, that protected these buildings. And we're really proud after all these decades to know that we changed the urban landscape of the city by protecting a lot of these buildings, including our first heritage conservation district for Armstrong's Point and for just recently Crescentwood. So I won't go on and on. I just wanted to tell you there was a lot of passion behind wanting to have something that we have as an organization, as a keepsake, to give you just a snapshot of our journey and how we feel that these buildings, some of the most beautiful in the country, have shaped our social history, not only in Winnipeg and Manitoba, but certainly Western Canada. So that's enough to say tonight, but I'd like to introduce you to our president, Greg Agnew, who is also, he's a historian who also contributed to the social history. So Greg, thanks. Thank you.
A little taller than I thought. I don't feel comfortable if I'm not in my outfit that I use at my presentations. Makes me feel like I've been there way back. My name is Greg Agnew, and I am proud to be president of Heritage Winnipeg. History, we love it. And it's important to us. It's important to all of us. We've got buildings that represent our history. And it's very simple. If a building is standing, you're going to ask questions. When was it built? Who designed it? who was in it over the years. And that keeps the history of that building alive, but it also keeps the history of our city alive through the various areas. In the 1880s, we were known as the Chicago of the North. We were feeding the West as it was growing. A little town called Regina, 500 people. A little town called Calgary, about 2,000 people. A little town called Edmonton, about 5,000 people. It needed goods and it needed services. And basically, we gave that. Everything that went out west came through Winnipeg. We had 148 factories. We made everything from pots, pans, dishes, clothing, farm equipment, everything like that. And that all came through Winnipeg to go out west as it was being settled. Whatever we didn't make or didn't have, we brought in and we sold it through here. And we have many people that became multimillionaires by doing that. If you take a look, interesting fact, Montreal was a city for 78 years, had 50 millionaires. Toronto was a city for 76 years, had 21 millionaires. We were 36 years old and we already had 19 millionaires. And if you add in the ones that were worth 100,000 up to $1 million, we go over 150. We were rich. We had 32 banks and financial institutions in the 4 blocks from William Avenue to Graham Avenue. And that tells you how much money was flowing through Winnipeg. You know, and it's important that we keep these buildings because they represent these iconic times. From 1900 to 1913, we were the fastest growing city in North America. We went from 50,000 in 1900 to over 260,000 by 1913. And we have the iconic buildings of that period to show that period of time. Bank of Montreal, Portage and Main, 1913. Hotel Fort Garry, 1913. CP Station on Higgins, 1906. The Royal Tower by Bank Tower by City Hall, which is Red River Community College Culinary Center, 1906. And many other buildings that form the history of our city. So it's not only the buildings that have the history, it's the time period that they reflect that is the history of our city. And I think we did pretty good from a few people, 100 of them, back in the early 1800s to what we have today and the extension of the city. A lot of people don't understand that in 1868 and 69, we almost became the US. US had just bought Alaska for $6 million. And they went to the Hudson's Bay and they wanted to call the land called Rupert's Land, which basically took in the prairies. And they offered them $15 million for it. And had they accepted that, BC and us, we'd all be America. And Canada would be from Thunder Bay to Nova Scotia only. And we'd never reach what we were known as being today. So kind of a little bit of a scary thought, but after a year of negotiations, we, the British government basically bought that Rupert's Land for $1.5 million and then gave it to the Canadian government so we could be a country from sea to shining sea, like Sir John A. Macdonald wanted. So it's important with that history that we have. And I could go on and on because I got 55 hours of that stuff. So I could go on and on and on about the different time periods and the different buildings that represent those time periods. But it's important that we keep in mind that these are a reflection of our city from its growth to its permanent time now and the future growth that we're going to have. These buildings represent that. At some point in time, all these modern buildings we have are going to be antiques. And they're going to be the old buildings that we're representing now. But we have a passion for what we do. And for those who don't know, we manage the Millennium Center, which is the old Bank of Commerce on Main Street between Lombard and McDermott. And that there, Cindy is involved in keeping all the different presentations and functions that happened there, weddings and everything else. And I got the glorious job of keeping the building in one shape. So it keeps us going. And we're also involved with a streetcar 356, one of the last city-made streetcars that we are restoring. Anybody wants to volunteer, we're always looking for volunteers for that. We've lost 3 years trying to work on that thing because of COVID and the Rail Museum being closed for renovations, but we're destined to get that feller back into shape and put it out there for the city to see and the patrons of the city and visitors. One of the other things we have to keep in mind is the movie industry. The movie industry comes here. Hallmark, just before COVID, had 7 movies that were made here in Winnipeg, plus other numerous movies, and some of them very popular movies. Parts of it, or most of it, were made here in Winnipeg. The reason? Because we have the Exchange District, the largest collection of buildings of the different eras, all in one spot. They don't have to build sets. They just come, use the streetscape, use the various buildings, and it brings in, they estimated, up over $1 million a day for a movie to come in and do its work here. And that puts into the city coffers. So it's important in the Exchange District, especially, that we don't play with it. Don't modernize it. Don't start fooling around with it, because the movie industry has already told us, you do, we're gone. So we need to be adamant about what we do. And that's what we do at Heritage Winnipeg. Fight all the time to try and keep our heritage buildings, because that's our history, our rich history that we need to hang on to, and we need to promote it. So I appreciate y'all coming out for this. This is my first collaboration on a book. And we actually made it through without killing each other. It was getting tough and go during those last few days of crunch. You know, we were getting at each other's throats pretty good there for a while. But we managed to survive, and the book managed to get done. And I personally am very proud of it. That's Robert's 4th book and my first one. So, but working with Robert has just been a blast. You know, it's just like he and I were cut out of the same kernel of corn. But you know, our minds worked the same. We got along great. And you know, if we needed a picture, you know, I remember, you know, the one picture that we didn't have for the Met, and we at nighttime says, you know, we got to put it in, but we don't have a picture. And he comes in the morning and says, here's a picture. And he did one overnight for us, just exceptional. And so, you know, it was just a great pleasure to work with Robert and be a part of this book. So I could go on and on and on, as everybody knows. So I will now pass it on to Robert and let him do his thing. And I thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you enjoy the book.
Greg, you're shorter than I thought. There we go. Well, thank you all for coming out. It's really great to see a full house here tonight. I just want to talk a bit about the process of doing this book. We started out, and it's a collaborative effort. We all put our hearts and souls into this. Part of the issue was trying to tell the story of Winnipeg in an interesting and engaging way, and determining what images we could use and try to boil it down into an interesting narrative. And that was more of a challenge than you might think, because we have so much material to work with. And we would have liked to have put everything in there, but we had to be selective. But what we were trying to do was create an overview that was interesting, engaging, sort of like a book you could read by the fireplace or maybe read in bed, and learn a little bit about Winnipeg. This is a very diverse city. It has a lot of interesting aspects to it. And we tried to cover off some of that in the book with little anecdotes and other things that happened over the years that are kind of interesting that probably most people wouldn't know otherwise. And that was really our focus, was to produce something that would be a keepsake, but also a very interesting publication, an interesting read. And that was really what we tried to do. And we're grateful for all the support we got from the City of Winnipeg, from the Thomas Sill Foundation. There were times when we weren't sure we were going to be able to pull this off. Many 6 and 7 hour sessions we tried to go over this and go over it again, rewrite it, and just get it basically as the best way we could. And yeah, it was coming to the crunch, and we were pulling those sessions, and there were times we thought we're not going to make it, but we did. And I thank you all for coming out. I hope you enjoy the book, and that it'll be a very valued keepsake for Winnipeg 150. Thank you. I'm keeping it short tonight. I just wanted to go over the process.
Okay, it was a brief presentation, but I'm going to have you three, Cindy, Greg, and Robert, sit here. I'm going to throw to audience questions, and whoever feels most compelled to answer, you guys can come up to the podium. Does that work for you? Okay, excellent. Okay, we're open for questions if anybody has one. Over here? Oh, no, okay. Oh, here.
Question about saving some of the remains of buildings that have been torn down. St. Regis Hotel went down. I wondered if there was anything that was, kept from that building. It had a museum almost.
That's me. Well, I'll stand here. We're happy to say the Oak Room at the St. Regis Hotel was taken out, reconstructed to the Patent 5 distillery on Alexander. I don't know if you've been there, but it's a little distillery in a warehouse building, and it's beautiful. And you can go for a drink, and you can also see the steel vats, how it's Patent 5 because it's the 5th patent for a distillery in the province. But he did that all with his own time and his own money. And believe it or not, we asked the city if they could give a little bit of funding to have that taken out, and so it wouldn't go to the landfill or somewhere where it was never seen again. Not only did they not give us any money, but when we went to go remove it, they said, hurry, 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 it's going to be demolished within weeks. So, but that's what we do too, is to make sure if we can, it's salvaged and it's reused in another building. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, anybody else here?
So I was just wondering, and I might have missed something here, but I noticed that there are no buildings pictured here from the Forks Market. Is it because it comes under a different jurisdiction, or what would be the reason for that, Cindy? Or whoever answered that.
I think as Robert said, we have 150 pictures. As you can appreciate, we had to very methodically pick which ones we wanted to tell the story. So there's probably going to be a lot of people telling us, why didn't this building go in and why didn't this building go in? So we prefaced this book launch with a lot of buildings that we couldn't include. And the Forks is a part of the Forks is 3 levels of government. There are original buildings like the Johnston Terminal certainly on there. But again, it was really bringing awareness to the story as opposed to a place. But we did talk about the Forks.
Yeah, we had over 350 prints we could have chosen from, so it's difficult to.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
I haven't seen the book yet, but it looks the illustrations look amazing, and the whole project is super important. I have another question that's related to the last one. The most recent building that I see represented is from 1926, 1925, 26. Everything seems to be focused on the period of Winnipeg's boom growth in the early 20th century. And I'm just wondering, is that the only aspect of Winnipeg's history that you see as our heritage? Why no buildings after 19? Why isn't?
In answer to your question, when you do see the book, you'll see more recent buildings in there.
Okay.
It's just that this particular slideshow here is we just pick certain ones for the purpose of illustrating what's in the book. But when you see the book, you'll see there's much more recent, like the Centennial Hall at the University of Winnipeg, which is a very interesting building because it uses the air rights over the existing building in a space frame structure. So you'll see that in the book. You'll see a lot of other more contemporary buildings in the book.
Can I answer too?
Sure.
I think in my presentation at the beginning, I wanted to stress that these buildings, whether they were built in 1910 or 1912 or 1920, that they're ongoing stories. And that's not the story of just who built it and what it was used for when it was opened. It's the ongoing story. And I use the examples now of the Bay. So that will be an ongoing story. It's not just a 1926 story. It's an ongoing story too. So very few buildings were built. We go into the modernist era. So we sort of look at the turn of the 20th century right up to the early 20s after the legislature was built. Then we move forward after the Second World War into more modernist, up till about 75. After that, and I won't give you my personal opinion, but you know, there really wasn't much built after the mid-70s that's worth talking about in any real sense. And to make a point, one of the counselors and some of the developers have been very poignant to say what we build today will not be the built heritage of tomorrow. They are not built to the standard. We have to be clear what heritage is. The construction of these buildings, the types of materials that were used. Some of these buildings took 2 years to build. I don't think a 3-month construction project can compare and will last 25, 50, 75 years. So this is what we're trying to protect, is a part of our history and heritage that will never be replicated again. It's finite asset. Sorry, I went on a little bit.
No, that was great. Thank you. Any other questions out there? Okay, many. I love that. Here, I'll start.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure if this is on topic, but talking about the continuing story of our architecture, the Housing Acceleration Fund from the federal government is changing the way we're looking at housing in neighborhoods. I know you've designated or protected 2 neighborhoods. Just your thoughts in general about how that new policy will affect the historic neighborhoods, for example, Wolseley, that aren't protected.
Yeah, I'm a little discouraged, as an understatement with the federal government, with better green policy, to have said that infill money was going to be used across Canada for existing extant buildings, not just for infill. I think it was a mistake. There's a lot of empty heritage buildings right now that can be retrofitted for residential living. Commercial suffering right now. We have a high percentage of commercial vacancies. Many people see a future for affordable housing in the Exchange and in the downtown. So I think that was the first mistake the federal government made, is not making that money available to existing structures. The second is making it a little bit like the Wild Wild West with the designs and the zoning, no zoning and all of those things. That is something, so just to sort of dispel a myth about heritage that we're not pro-development, we are, but we care about sensitive infill. And we don't necessarily know with this accelerator funding if we're going to get sensitive or sympathetic infill outside of those historic districts. That's why it was so important to get them as an HCD, which was the first in Winnipeg in 2019.
Okay, there was somebody else over here.
Robert, with the various materials that these heritage buildings have, what was the most fun? It'd be terracotta or marble or what have you?
Well, the materials, sorry, I'll come to them. The materials that were used then will be prohibitively expensive today. And a lot of terracotta was used. They may be a steel frame building. In fact, a lot of them were, but they were covered with very intricate terracotta tiles. And this is the kind of thing you wouldn't see today. It's just too expensive to do. And so the construction of the buildings, a lot of them were fireproof. They were fully concrete floors, steel frame, and yet they look, because of the terracotta, you would never guess that. And that's the idea. Back then, they tried to hide the structure of the building. behind these elegant facades, whereas when the modernist era took over, the idea was to show the bones of the building, to celebrate the construction. So it's a totally different mindset as we move from the 1930s, probably the Art Deco era, into modernism, into full modernism in the well, it actually started in the 20s and right up to the current time. So it's a different mindset in designing buildings. So hopefully that answers your question.
There was a building that was torn down, I think, in the 80s, and I think it was the Empire Hotel.
Yes.
It had a cast iron
That
facade.
was a cast iron facade over a wooden structure.
But that cast iron facade, at the time they tore it down, I remember the news story was, oh, we're saving it, we're putting it.
Part of it is in storage, and some of it's at the St. Boniface Cultural Center. It's inside.
So some.
It's inside, yeah.
There's still some that.
It is there, yeah.
Okay, one more question here.
Yes, I'd like to ask how Heritage Winnipeg decided or came up with the idea that they should do something to help celebrate Winnipeg 150.
Yeah.
I think the answer, the short answer is we love Winnipeg. We love Winnipeg's built heritage. We love the history. We're all history buffs. We think that when you go visit any great city, where's the first place you go? You go to the guts of the city, the core of the city, to find out the history, the culture. There's so much that comes from our heritage. So the passion came from, we have a 150 in my lifetime and many others that'll never happen again. It's a once in my lifetime. And I think to have something celebratory that reflects the hard work. So again, this isn't just a chronological account of built heritage and how beautiful it is. The other story is how hard it was in the journey to protect it from the city, from its destroying its own assets in a strange kind of way. They never really saw any value. I was asked today on CJOB, was it true that in the 60s, Stephen Juba wanted to tear down every building in the exchange? And the sad answer is yes. And that's why I say we're grassroots. We're citizens who picked it up and down Main Street to save the former Bank of Commerce and the Bank of Hamilton on the corner of McDermott and Main. And they are actually starting to take in the basement. You can see where they tore the marble off in the basement to start demolition because they needed another surface parking lot. So, yeah, so passion.
More over here.
I was wondering about the Carnegie Library in William, that if I understood the city correctly, they were looking at moving the archives back into that building because the repairs have been done. What is the status of that?
Can we just use that? Okay, I was really involved in that. So when the rainstorm happened and the roof and leaking and closed in Myrtle, it was a disaster. They had no plans in going back, but ourselves and a consortium held them accountable to why you're not going back. Once litigation was over, they interestingly enough did a study. The cost to lease, the cost to buy their own new space, or the cost to go back and rehabilitate the building. And to rehabilitate Carnegie Library was $10.8 million less than any other option. So Heritage won the day on that, and subsequently it's critical to get the archives out of Myrtle and back into Carnegie because they're in threat right now, damage of water and fire. So it's about a building now and an archive. So this is a double important issue. And I'm happy to say, because we got the support from Mayor Gillingham, that this is a City of Winnipeg 150 project that is starting this year. I believe it's two and a half years to undertake the whole transition. But that's a commitment by our mayor. And I can honestly say, outside of this book, this is the first mayor in decades, because I've been here a long time, that has really supported built heritage in a supportive way of projects, or supporting what we do as an organization and why we do what we do. So maybe the stars are aligning.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, I actually have a few questions from our chat room, so the people watching at home. So let me just pull that. I promise I'm not checking my Instagram or something. Let's see. Okay, so here, I'm gonna position myself here. So we have a question from Elizabeth Keeler, who's watching from home. Is there much in the book about Red River College Polytechnic's building on Princess Street or any of the other Red River campus buildings?
Yes, there is.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, we talk about the saving of those facades and how they were integrated into a modern structure to serve the needs of Red River downtown, the campus.
And the World Bank.
And the Royal Bank.
And the Royal Bank.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Laura Lynn Malloy asks, knowing the rich history of our city, how did you choose which buildings were to be drawn?
Well, it was very difficult because we had something like 350 images already prepared. And so what we were trying to do was to tell an overview in an interesting and engaging way and use those illustrations to support that.
Okay, those are our questions from home. Is there anybody else? Oh, I see.
That means he has 200 extra pictures.
It does, yeah, it does.
There's another book coming.
Yeah, yep.
I actually have a question for Robert. Would you mind stepping up so we can see you at home on the podium? In front of the webcam. Thank you so much. I'm just curious, Robert, about like when did you start drawing buildings? Like, were you a kid? Like, what draws
I started when I was a kid. My background, I worked in the architectural field for many years and as an industrial designer. And I've worked here in the UK and so on. So I have a long history of doing this. But yes, I started out when I was probably 8 or 9. I was designing houses when I was 8 or 9 years old. So, you know, so it's been a long time.
Okay, what draws you to the buildings? Like, as
well, no, I'm drawn to all kinds of design of any kind. And I've been fortunate enough that some of my work has been the recipient of international awards. And that's been a great honor for me. And just to partake in this profession is thrilling. I'm kind of retired now, but I've always enjoyed it. It's taken me around the world and I'm very grateful to have been able to do it.
Great. Casually retired, but also
Casually,
watching books,
yeah.
and, you know, doing overnight flyings. That's a good place to stop. If anybody else has any questions, you're free to ask Robert or Sydney or Greg. We're gonna bring Robert over to the signing table, which is right next to the cash desk to sign his books. We're gonna ask you to stay seated while we transport our guests over to the signing table. And in a few moments, you can join us over there and get your copy signed. So thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who came. Thank you to Heritage Winnipeg tonight. Wonderful information and presentation and a beautiful book. Thank you to Robert for being with us and have a good evening. Thanks.
Yeah.